उपस्थित असलेले या संस्थेचे ॲडमिनिस्ट्रेटर, आमचे मित्र पांडुरंग फळदेसाई, हेता पंडित, त्यांचे फ्रेंड्स आणि अंगा जमलेले सगळे कॉलेजचे फॅकल्टी मेंबर्स आणि विद्यार्थी. जयंती नाईक, सुरुवातीकच एक गोष्ट सांगता की अशा पद्धतीनं अशा सब्जेक्टा खातीर 2 दिसाचे चर्चासत्र दवरपाची ही आयडिया म्हणजे पांडुरंग फळदेसाई आणि बालाजी शनाय ह्यांनी जी घडवून आणली आणि खूपशा लोकांच्या ह्याच्यात योगदान असताले, ही अतिशय एक इम्पॉर्टंट गजाल. जे केवळ एक राष्ट्रीय कार्यक्रम असे त्याचे स्वरूप असा म्हणून त्यांनी केले असे हांव म्हणना. बिकॉज माय ओपिनियन, परसेप्शन, आय डोंट हॅव रिसर्च to support that, but normally we Indians have very less inclination for documentation. It's basically, I considered in my young age that it's basically an European trait. We don't document most of the things, and that documentation possibly started in a European occupations. There are various reasons, but today's my topic basically is going beyond Goa. Essentially, we always distinguish, and you must have seen yesterday and your academics also. I'm not much on the theory, but we distinguish the oral culture and the written word. The oral culture, basically the oral history, it has 2-3 important features that you must have seen, learn. The first feature of oral history or oral culture, what I see, and most of the academician also has told us, that it doesn't have a fixed text. In fact, there is no text in that. It's a telling. Now, each telling is different. And therefore, there is no version or a variation. Many times we use the word that this is this version of a oral history. There is no version. There is no variation. Each telling is independent, different. The second feature, obvious feature, is there is no single writer. It's a collective thing. This is the third feature where most of the people who are in a performing arts, they will understand that better. That many times these kind of oral history comes over the generations, 500,000 years beyond that, and it's not only in the form of a storytelling, but it's presented in the form of a plays, performances. It's a dance drama presentation, so it's a ample variety in that, and then it's presented in such a way that the audience, unlike this kind of a lecture, participates in that, gets involved in that. And therefore you will find many times, particularly the older generation people, if you talk about Ramayana, they think that Ramayana is something which has already happened. It's a history. I don't belong to the modern generation, but I always convinced that it's a part of a fiction. So they get involved in that presentation, and that involvement makes that it has happened. It's nothing bad in that. Only issue is thousands of years these kind of oral things remain with us. In a modern language, I call it, these are libraries of the mind. In India, or for that matter in the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, nobody reads Mahabharata or Ramayana for the first time. That's what A.K. Ramanujam said. It's always with us. At least formally, I have never read Ramayana or Mahabharata as a text, either in English or Marathi or in Konkani. But most of the things, the commentary on Ramayana or Mahabharata I read. But I relate to anything which goes on that because it's a part of my collective memory. Also a personal memory. So the folk culture, therefore, it survives for a long time. Possibly when your mind remembers something, the memory has a peculiar feature that most of the psychologists have written, and they say that memory always gets reconstructed. Even in your case, you are young people, but as you grow older, you will understand what happened 10 years back or 15 years back, or what happened day before yesterday. Many times there are errors in remembering that. We reconstruct that. Now, that's a feature of a memory. But even then, understanding that the function of memory is like that, factually many times it may not come closer to the documentation. So today, for a short while, I am just going through some of the examples, what I feel which are pertinent for this topic. Now, the first example comes for me is a Ramayana. Both Ramayana and Mahabharata are not only for India, as you all know. These are so many other countries in our subcontinent where both these epics are very popular and over the thousands of years which are going on. The printed version of, say, Valmiki's Ramayana in Sanskrit, that came little later. But there are issues on that. First of all, in the beginning, when this researchers started learning, particularly a lot of European writers and A.K. Ramanujam, he wrote one seminal essay in 1991. He said that there are almost 300 Ramayanas. In oral tradition, there is no, as I was telling, there is no standard single framework or a single text. And each region has its own regional flavor. The way we say, ki in Goa you have a breakfast, but you may not have a breakfast the way Madras what they have a breakfast, or Bombay what they have a breakfast. There is a regional flavor in Goa's breakfast. So everywhere these stories of Ramayana, when there were tellings of Ramayana, there was a regional flavor. But it was not just a regional flavor. The tellings also had a different focus. Most of the Ramayanas tales, particularly in Indian languages, you find these are Ramakatha, means Rama's tales. But in oral tradition, there were Sita Katha. Sita was in focus. And the entire Ramayana was focused on Sita and what happens around her. It's slightly difficult for us, to visualize that. In certain parts, Ravana was not painted as a villain. He was different. Why I am telling this? That this oral tradition has such a inclusiveness, such a plurality, that it's very difficult to understand that in a standard text. And therefore, this is an important issue which I will come last, that the ethical considerations matter the most when you are documenting that oral culture, because it's very difficult to include all these aspects when you are making a standard text. And the beauty of that oral culture, possibly the way we spoil our beauty in renovation, say renovation of a Kala Academy. The way we spoil that, just an example. So similarly, we may, in documenting, what may happen is that plurality may go. And only the critics, the culture critics, they keep on writing on this, and very small minority keeps on reading that. But that I will come last. In Indian languages, as most of you are from Goa, you understand definitely Konkani, but some of you may understand also partly Marathi. The beginning of Marathi literature, it started with, there was one sect called Mahanubhav sect. These so many sects were from the Hinduism, they came out, they had some differences. And that Mahanubhav sect, there was one Samsthapak, the founder, his name was Chakradhar. Chakradhar, it was in a 13th century. 13th century. So the Chakradhar basically was a very famous personality. He has a very high sense of humor, highly spiritual, but his way of looking at the life around was a very, very genuine and positive. As he differed from the establishment, naturally the then establishment was having anger against him, and suddenly one day he vanished. We don't have a reference what happened to him. And he had several followers. And incidentally, the Mahanubhav sect also had a male as well as female followers that time. It was something unusual in 13th century. So once he disappeared, so you can say he died. Most of his shishyas, his disciples, no, they felt restless. They became emotional. And his main shishya was Nagarjun. Now this Nagdevacharya or Nagdevacharya, that Nagdevacharya went into a mild depression. So in that mild depression, he started his tour of his memory, remembering his guru, Chakradhar, how he was, what he used to tell, how he was going around, everything. And mentally, he reconstructed his biography. So he was sitting alone after his death for a long time. So a lot of his other disciples, they went to him. And one was Mahimbat, who was the writer of that. Now, Mahimbat also asked him, why you're so silent, what you're doing. He said, no, I'm remembering him. And many times, in those times, even now, remembering something has an importance. No, that was a religious point of view. If you remember somebody, even in our own families, suppose your grandfather or your good friend who suddenly dies in between, we always say, as long as we remember him, he is alive. So remembering has a function to keep alive the people who are no more physically. So this Mahimbat said, I would like to note down what you are thinking about him. So it almost took 6 months for him, Mahimbat, to record whatever he was talking about Chakradhar. That was his biography. Then after that, this Nagarjun told him, I'm a single individual. You should not write a biography based on a single individual. Now, this is the ethics of writing biography. He said, you also go to the other people who came directly into the contact of a Chakradhar and collect that information. And those things were called liras, those memories, those liras. So he said, only do one thing, don't go to the secondary source, go to the primary source, what you say in the research, that those people who were directly in contact, not otherwise. So this Mahimbat went. So he went around, and that was agriculture society again. He went to the people, he went to some people, he was in his field, they told, he went to the field, he was plowing on his field, he went back from him, asked him those liras, की कसो असलो तो कितें उलयतालो तेणे कितें सांगला तुमकां खंय भोंवतालो तो all those he asked and he noted down those things. Now this ethics is getting the information when you're writing something. It's not just biography but a lot of other documentation what you do from the primary source. Now this ethics that Nagarjun, that Nagdevacharya, he said that this is very important for people, and this Mahimbat followed that. And he was so sincere, that Mahimbat. Some places he went and he asked some people that, tell me those liras, how a Chakradhar. They said, Are Baba, as you have come, first have something, have a water, have a tea, or whatever they used to serve that time. He said, no, I will have that later. First you tell me his memories. So along with that, there was a sincerity. after what he collected, mime, but all those leelas, what he collected, Nagdevacharya, he said, come with all those things. Now, I will see the authenticity of each and every leela what you have collected. Whether by my common sense and my experience, I feel that whether Chakradhar has said this. So again, this is a ethics. He deleted some of those leelas which he found which were not appropriate, included all those things. And then this Leela Charitra came. Now, Leela Charitra is the first non-fiction work in Marathi. Jnaneshwari came much after that. So, and there are a lot of words, in case anybody is interested, if you read Leela Charitra, there are a lot of words which are presently we are using in Kokni. Those words are there. So, slightly difficult. It's not the present time days Marathi, but for a Kokni speaker, it's much easier to read that. So you can understand in the beginning in the medieval India, the ethics in a non-fiction, in a literary form of a biography, were followed in such a sincere ways, which, see, normally, which were lacking subsequently. In modern times, 19th century or 20th century, when a lot of biographies came, or for that matter, even the autobiographies which came in the West, even in the West, I'm saying, even in Europe, there were issues. There were factual errors. So, the ethics in documentation definitely is a reflection of the society. What moral ethical structure, what we say, that both East and West we are all losing, and Goa we see it losing very fast. Means Goa was one of the last bastion in India which has preserved the moral and ethical fabric. Now that is going in a big way. And I mean, capitalism will erode it further. Issue is to see how spontaneously, maybe in a religious spirit, it's a semi-religious kind of a thing, a spirit, they preserve that. That spirit in Leela Charitra. After Leela Charitra, another thing comes in Indian language, again in the Marathi, is Sant Tukaram. Now, Sant Tukaram is I can say is one of the greatest poet in Marathi or Indian language. Now, all the modern poets in Marathi or in English and other languages, they accept him as the grandfather. Means whether it's a Dilip Chitri or Arun Kolatkar or Bhalchandra Nemade, they all owe all their legacy to Sant Tukaram. Now this Sant Tukaram, his abhangs, what they say, there were leelas of Chakradhar, this were called the abhang. Now these abhangs were part of the language. They're part of Marathi language. Now, like Chakradhar, Tukaram also was a rebel against the establishment, against the hypocrisy in the existing system. He also disappeared one day. His entire property was eroded. And there were myths, again. There are researchers of myths here. There were myths that मराठीत त्याला म्हणतात त्या अभंगाच्या वह्या, त्याच्या अभंगाच्या वह्या त्या इंद्रायणीमध्ये बुडाल्या आणि परत त्या तरंगल्या. No, that's a myth. All that is, whatever he wrote in his wahi, his notebook, those notebooks were destroyed. Now, oral culture is such a culture, thousands of years, it remains with us, human beings, in our libraries of the mind. We can always reconstruct that. So there was no text, there was no notebook of Tukaram. Tukaram was a contemporary of Shivaji. So it was available during that time, after his death. Imagine, after his death of Sant Tukaram, which is the greatest poet in Indian language, after 100 years, so one of his follower, Trambak Kasar, he started collecting his abhangs. Now he started collecting from the people, because these abhangs were part of the collective memory of the people. They used to sing. It took 40 years, 40 years, 40 वर्ष लागली त्याका. ते सगळे अभंग एकठांय करपाक. And that was the only आवृत्ती, only edition is a founding edition of Tukaram's Abhang, which we read now. So see the ethics followed in that documentation, and that was only possible because of that strongness of the oral culture. Okay, after Tukaram, we'll come to Goa. We have Soirobanath. Now Soirobanath was a Nath Panthi. There was a Nath Panth here. Now this Soirobanath was a person who used to almost wander here and there. In Pedne, in Savantwadi, that area, he used to go around and he used to sing. He used to recite those poems. And he was in his own mind. तो स्वतःच्या ह्याच्यातच मग्न असतं. His sister used to note down those. And the paper was extremely costly and he was a very poor person. So she used to write down those poetry on हे आमच्या झाडाची पानं असताना त्या पानावरती बरेच आहे. त्या झाडाच्या पानावरती बरेच आहे. And then she used to keep that corner. One day, this Chokoba's mother, she came to his room and she found that there's a lot of dust and कचरा असा सगळं कॉर्नर. पण तिने ते सगळी झाडाची पानं काढली बाहेर ओढून ती हे केली, म्हणजे उजव लावलं ते. सो दोज वेरी डिस्ट्रॉयड. बट देन Chokoba did not remain in one place. He in fact went to Gwalior also, Maji Shinde's place, where he met Jiuba Dada Kerkar also, all those things. But then he kept wandering, and a lot of other people also noted down what he was saying. So his poetry also, Chokoba's poetry also, I mean, he has such a classic lines like that must be part of your textbooks whenever you were studying. ते हरिभजना विन काळ घालवू नको रे. Those are very classic and all. I mean, those are beyond Goa. So those lines are still remaining because of that strongness of oral culture which preserved what he was saying. And then subsequently those were documented. So another example, again going back to Maharashtra again, they have that Warkari, the Bhakti Parampara. Now this Bhakti Parampara was something slightly different because there people from all walks of the life, all castes and the religions, they joined. There were Muslims also in that. There were Dalits also in that. So there was one important poet initially along with very early period, Chokoba Mela. Now this Chokoba was a Dalit poet. His poetry, because that time and even now, the attitude towards the lower caste was always extremely, they used to look down upon them. And there was an untouchability also that was practiced in a big way. So Chokoba was not considered much. So his poetry nobody could record. Very late in almost 20th century, Chokoba's abhangs were documented by some of the scholars based on the collective memory of the people. You can imagine his period is 13th century and 20th century, his abhangs were documented. So this documentation has a extremely important memory. If you see going beyond India, I mean it's like our Ramayana and Mahabharata. This is another classic tales which originated from Arabia. That's Arabian Nights. Now this Arabian Nights has an extremely interesting journey. This Arabian, it originated in Arabia. It is before Common Era. It said that even the Alexander, what we call Sikandar, now Alexander also in the long battles in the evening night time, he always need to listen to some of the stories. So he kept aside the Homer, the Odyssey, and he said, "Mujhe sunao Arabian Nights ke katha hai." So he started listening to the Arabian Nights. Now this when the Muslims, they invaded Spain, when they occupied major portion of the Spain, Arabian Nights went to Spain. And the Europeans, as I was telling in the beginning, they have a personality trait of documenting things. So they, not in a comprehensive way, but in small ways, the first Arabian Night was documented, written word, it was in Spain. And again, there is a strange thing. This written word came with the invention of a paper. Paper was invented in China. But it almost took 600 years to travel that paper from China to Spain. Because they kept that as a secret. There are several reasons for that. Even in Indian context, most of the texts what they used to write, they were never made accessible to the general public. That sense goes beyond literature, that sense goes to the sociology, psychology and culture, that most of the elite class, those people who were, what you say in Konkani, बुद्धवंत आपले ज्ञान easily accessible करना, they keep it with themselves. Now that trend is a human tendency. That tendency was there. So after invention of paper, after such a long, it was recorded in a paper. But again, Spain with those civil war and all, it did not go all over the Europe. It was only in after Aurangzeb's death, that's a reference I always carry. After 2 years after Aurangzeb's death, it was published in France, in Paris. The Arabian Nights were published in Paris. Now, Paris was a center of a culture. All writers, filmmakers, everybody started most of their careers in Paris. Not that time, but still, even that time, Paris was center of a culture, the world culture. From Paris, it became extremely popular in Paris. And then it went to all other European languages. So you can imagine the origination of Arabian Nights in Arabic world. So many other Arabic world may be having about 18, 20 countries. And this, when it was documented, it came in a written form in Arabic world, it was in the 19th century. So you can imagine the things, Arabian Nights, was existing 2000 years ago. It came in a written word, in a book form in Arabia in 19th century. But again, the issue of ethics come here. Most of you are aware how this Arabian Night story, it is a sequence from one story to another. Because there's somebody who is going to die and then she has to survive. So your curiosity has to be kept alive. So there were several other stories which were added from Syria and other countries. Like, you must have seen or heard also, Ali Baba and Chalitsoor. Chalitsoor is very popular in Goa. So, and there was a film also in my childhood I saw. Then we have got a story of Alauddin आणि जादूचा देवा. कोकणीत पण असतात अल्लाउद्दीन आणि जादूचा देवा. किंवा सिंदबाद आणि त्याचे 7 voyage, 7 सफर. सिंदबादच्या 7 सफरी. Sindbad's. No, these things were added later. These were never part of the original Arabian Nights. Never a part of that. These were added. Now, there were translators also. Like Richard Burton, who translated into English. Richard Burton gave a lot of erotic flavor or a tone to these stories. These stories are erotic, but not obscene or something. They are classic. So he gave that tone. In Marathi, in 19th century, it's one old generation fellow, Krishna Shastri Chiplunker. He translated that as Arabi भाषेतील सुरस आणि चमत्कारिक कथा. One of the very sober translation of Arabian Nights. He toned down that erotic thing. Because so that the family and the middle class should read those things. Now the question of ethics comes in the sense that such a grand oral tradition of a storytelling in the form of Arabian Nights, when it was recorded, lot of things were added, tone was made erotic. When do you do this? When you are considering the market forces. Considering the market forces, the tone was changed, the stories were added, and the various editions which came, these were always the illustrated editions with the pictures and all. We'll go for a question answer, but before that, the last thing which I started from the beginning, because I normally don't talk much. The last thing which comes on an ethical sense of a documentation is such a plural tradition, oral tradition, when you are documenting and coming in a single text. There are several issues on which it can be attacked. It was Edward Said, you must have read in the beginning, how he said the Westerners, तुम्ही कोकणीत किंवा मराठीत आमच्याकडे वजरीकर म्हणून एक असा लेखक, तो म्हणता वसाहतवादी मनोवृत्ती, म्हणजे दोज colonial mindset, those people who ruled Goa or those people who ruled rest of India or Africa or Latin America, whenever they documented things, they had their own worldview and their point of view. That reflects there. So that's not the whole picture. You know how we look in our history also. 1857 चे युद्ध आम्ही मराठीत शिकलो. 1857 आम्ही ते 1857 चे युद्ध म्हणून शिकलो. आता नाऊ वेन यू आर रीडिंग, इट्स अ फर्स्ट वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडन्स. Or when we call Shivaji, the Europeans, they call him as a rebel. Or those modern historians, they say he is a grand rebel, not a king. When we call him a king, we say no, he was a warrior king. So that difference always remains when you are coming in a single text in that oral tradition. So that most of the people, they don't understand that who is writing that, who is documenting. It's not just the identity of who, that whether he's from Maharashtra or whether he's from Goa or he's from... No, not that. What is his worldview? Whether a Marxist is writing a history or whether a rightist is writing a history. Things are different. And it's not just history. Many times in our culture, whatever we study, like for example, I am brought up in a Western Maharashtra. Partly I was in Bombay also, then Mumbai. So we brought up in a history. Whatever I learned is through historical fiction. That's a separate category. Not a history books. I did not read Yadunath Sarkar or O.P. Surlekar. No. I read some novels on a history, like Sriman Yogi by Ranjit Desai, that way. So that historical fiction gives you totally a distorted view of history. Totally distorted. Even the context was different. And people just don't. And even if you try to convince them, biases and prejudices are so common that suppose I have a bias and prejudice in my mind and you give me a contrary reference. Suppose I am talking something on Ramayana or anything and you give me a contrary reference to that. I don't believe. I say what you are selling is false. Even if you give me a written reference. This is how human mind works. I have seen in Goa also various lectures here in the beginning. Some 10 years back, there was a hall like this. Somebody had published a book. It was in probably Marathi. And there were speeches. And they were talking about Inquisition. And those people who were talking, very prominent people, they said in a big voice, no, when this Inquisition was there in Goa, that time, why did Shivaji did not help? So I just went and I said, I just want to tell, but as the lecture was going on, when he came out, I said, Shivaji's time was different. Inquisition was different. Inquisition time, his grandfather was there. Shivaji is 1630 birth. Inquisition was just before that century. So try to understand the context. So many times, see, this is what, and he has written 2 or 3 articles on this subject. See, imagine, I'm saying, when you are coming to the printed word, the ethics are forgotten. I'm saying, you write something against Shivaji, I have no issues. I'm not identified with Shivaji. But ethics of going to the primary source, checking the source, at least checking his time, that is important. That ethical considerations, even in a non-fiction, are missing. Fiction are totally missing, historical fiction, but non-fiction, they are totally missing. And in a convincing manner, people just keep on talking those issues. That's a different issue, but my primary issue on this, coming to the written word, the oral tradition, there subsequently, for me personally, an issue came on Ramayana. See, Valmiki Ramayana, then subsequently what we consider as a standard text. And then, because as I was telling you in earlier Ramayana, there are several tellings of Ramayana where Sita is the main character. And everything revolves around Sita. But in a patriarchal society, ours is a patriarchal society, where they were all Ram Katha. And subsequently, a lot of critics, cultural critics, the writers, they wrote on this. 2-3 years back, we have, as you are young people, we have one of the greatest festival here in Goa, that's Serendipity. Now, Serendipity has several plays, theatre, and even the dance drama presentations. There was one presentation, it was a dance drama presentation on Ramayana. 3-4 years back. 3 years back probably. And every year they have issues on Ramayana and Mahabharata is very common in their presentations. So there, they extremely convincingly showed that the present Ramayana, what we take as a standard, it has a gender bias, extreme gender bias. All the female characters, mainly the Sita and even several other female characters, are relegated into the background. They convincingly showed that. Now, why this happens? Because the oral culture has always taken a place, given a place for this. It was more inclusive than the written word. All that I am saying is, the written word, I'm talking normally about the books, but now we get more influenced by you don't read newspapers, that I am aware, but at least whatever you read on a Facebook or a WhatsApp, or even what we read or Pandurang Phaladesai read in newspapers or magazines. I don't know whether you read Zag or Bim or any other magazine. Very younger generation Z doesn't read magazines and the newspapers. But even then, what I am saying is, the printed word, in my time, when I was growing up, I always used to take that as a sacred. पहिले आम्ही समजा एखादी गोष्ट गजाल खरी असली तर म्हणतो, अरे ती पेपरात लिहिले. जे पेपरात लिहिले म्हणजे दॅट्स अ खरे. नाऊ सपोज समबडी टेल्स मी की पेपरात लिहिले म्हणजे मी आय जस्ट इग्नोर दॅट. That's a different issue. But earlier, Pepratile has some kind of a authenticity. Now, something which is shown in the news, yes, we don't believe that now. Now, the moral ethical fabric in that written word has gone to such an extent, and particularly now we are all under the control of a digital media. Digital media, what we read, particularly on important subjects of literature, history, climate change, most of the things are distorted. These are distorted. The line between truth and the falsehood is very thin. And most of us, and it's very natural, if I was in your position, we get swayed away by that. So, I'm not requesting you to be careful or something. All that I'm doing is I'm just pointing out that we have to be slightly like a researcher, careful in trusting a written word. Wherever possible, आता म्हणजे टेक्स्टबुकात समजा तुमका शब्दार्थ देऊ ना, तर प्रत्येक वेळेस गुगलवर बसून शब्दार्थ पळोवपाचे ना, की त्या गुगल ऑल्सो कॅन कमिट सेव्हरल मिस्टेक्स. बेटर टू गो द इम्पॉर्टंट बेसिक सोर्सेस. That rarely we do. And many times, I know there are a lot of faculty members, but our teachers and the faculty members from the university, they also don't do that. They don't do to the journal section, they don't do the original. It's a part of your personality. Some people who are serious, they go to the original sources. So unless, keeping aside the Google, unless we go to the original sources, we may not have that alternate view of the things. Particularly if you are in the field of research, or in your personal liking, if you're studying any particular aspect. Don't take that written word as a sacred. No. And most of our understanding more of a moral ethical thing is based on identity features. Who is the writer, where from he is, what is his language, what is his region. We, based on that, we interpret what is correct. No, that is very extremely unscientific. And not necessarily people who are writing from the West are writing the correct things. Not necessarily. You should also doubt them. There are several things they have also committed mistakes. So this is, I say, totally uncertain word for a young people. But still, as a human mind, we need to arrive at something. Suppose you have some kind of ideology, then that ideology normally helps you to root it down to something. So for me, this documentation of oral culture, now, because there are several things which are yet to be documented, I feel. There are a lot of researchers who will be also involved in that. I can't advise anybody, I'm not in that capacity also, but that plurality, that beauty of that oral culture, which survived for thousands of years, we should have some kind of a moral and ethical respect for that, and we have to be more inclusive in recording that. Thank you.
And you have spoken about the authenticity and the reliability of the textual work. So if I go for the interview, and if there are two people who are speak on the same topic, but they are narrating it in different manner, so how will come to know which is the right thing?
You know, as I was telling you, I mean, in the beginning, that in oral history, this word standard text doesn't arise. They call it, the Ramanujam used to call it tellings. Each telling is different. And that telling cannot be compared to a standard text. Each telling is different. It has its own independence. So that our mindset, that which is correct from the original. See, the correctness comes when you have a standard text. I'll tell you. Parallel example I'll give you. You can see. See, with the colonial area, when the West started occupying the larger properties of Asia, Latin America, Africa, they also came with the religious conversions. Now, there they wanted to translate their religious text. So the church, right from the beginning, said the translation of these religious texts should be a sense for a sense, not word for a word. So even Thomas Stephens, when he translated here, he translated into Marathi, but he also asked initially, he wrote a letter that is on the record, asked, give me those printing press things for Devanagari script. Those were not given. But all these translations were pre-translations. They were, I mean, that was a betrayal or a traitor of the original text. I have to understand this. This is the very modern and progressive attitude what church followed in the translation of the religious text. And therefore, it had a more access to the people. Suppose you go strictly, something is religious, some religion it happens. If a slight, some small thing change, people become curious. So these things that when there is a telling in a oral tradition, there is absolutely no standard by which you can compare it or judge it. Okay, this is right, or this is better, and this is worse. Each telling is different. This is a famous example what Ramanujam also gives. That Ramayana is presented in various times in a performances and plays. In one of the plays, when this Rama went for exile, Vanvas, Sita insisted that she should accompany him. So Rama, being an ideal person, he refused. He said, "No, why should? It is my thing. I will carry on." No. And then one of the performances, that male actor Rama, he got so much involved in that acting that he said, "No, no, no, you can't come. You can't come. That's my own thing, and I will suffer. That suffering is my own." Then that Sita goes beyond text and she says, "There are so many Ramayanas, and which Ramayanas Sita did not go with Ram? Tell me." Then he became quiet, and that scene was ended.
How do we go about translating? Because we are also in the process of, collecting memories, and all of them are spoken in their native language, in Konkani, Marathi, and now we would like to make it accessible to people. So, what do you suggest is the way forward?
There's a general issue of the translations. Most of the people who are getting into translation, traditionally, they were not considered as a creative writers. The creative writers normally rarely go. There are exceptions all over the world. For example, I tell you, Kafka. Kafka's first translation came by George Luis Borges, a Spanish writer, Argentina, but in Spanish. Second came from Bruno Schulz. Third came from some other writers. Now, these were all original writers in their own languages. They were never ventured into because they were so fascinated by Kafka's writing. The translation, the kind of translation what we see today, I'm not talking like a jury, but many times the kind of quality people who are in a creative field, they are not venturing out. And it's like I spent my life in a government service. In a government service, if a clerk or head clerk start translating, that becomes a problem because we say you translate that, but you give me a draft or something which is very important. Suppose I have to submit a affidavit in a high court. I don't give their job to my draft. I will write myself. Or suppose there is an assembly question where my minister has to reply. I will write myself. It's like that. So, unless creative writers like Shanta Gokhale is doing a lot of translations in Bombay. Jerry Pinto is doing. Now, Jerry Pinto and Shanta Gokhale last month came out with 3-4 Marathi classics into English. Like Bangarwadi, Venkatesh Madgulkar, she came. A lot of other things she. Now, those, even Sane Guruji's books she translated. These are one of the finest translations. Because Shanta Gokhale, she knows English as well as Marathi in both ways. Both the language she is very efficient. Jerry Pinto, the same thing. And there is also ethical and moral consideration. They are very sincere people of old generation, elderly people. So they are doing those translations. But if you see the translations in good books like Pudlik Naik's Achev or Mahabhareshwar Sail's books, creative books into English, there are issues. And then translation is the only medium for a small language like Konkani. It's like a bird in a cage. Once you translate, the cage is open, but it should go in a good atmosphere. So that is lacking and it may take some time.
Thank you.
नाही, तुम्ही आता ट्रान्सलेशनचं बोललात ना, मी पण फोकलोरचं काम करते, ट्रान्सलेशन सुद्धा कधी करते. पण तुमच्या मताप्रमाणे जनरल ट्रान्सलेशन म्हणजे आता शांता गोखले अथवा बाकीची जे लोक आहेत मराठी साहित्याचे वेगवेगळ्या
उदाहरण दिलं
ओके, पण बाकीचं वेगवेगळे जे प्रकार आहेत आणि फोक टेक्स्टचं ट्रान्सलेशन यात काय फरक आहे तुमच्या मताप्रमाणे? आणखी एक जोडून एक प्रश्न. मगाशी तुम्ही बोलताना म्हणजे संत सोयरोबना चुकोबा यांचं सगळं यांच्याविषयी सुद्धा तुम्ही उल्लेख केलात, पण त्यांचं जे लिखाण आहे ते या ओरल हिस्ट्रीमध्ये अथवा फोकलोरमध्ये कसं येतं तुमच्या मताप्रमाणे? येत नाही. एक्झाम्पल दिलं.
ओरल हिस्ट्रीमध्ये एखादी गोष्ट कशी जिवंत राहते हजारो वर्ष, ती जरी त्याचं टेक्स्ट नाही झालं तर ते आपल्याला रिबिल्ड करता येतं.
अच्छा, मला जरा हे तुमच्या मत सांगा, म्हणजे माझं मत कदाचित वेगळं असेल. फोकलोरच्या टेक्स्टचं ट्रान्सलेशन सोपं आहे की कठीण आहे? होतं काय एक्झॅक्ट?
विषय नाहीये, पण नॉर्मली फोकलोर हे पोएट्रीच्या ह्याच्यात येतं, म्हणजे पोएटिक असतं ते, आणि पोएटिक ट्रान्सलेशन्स ही डिफिकल्ट असतातच. म्हणजे तुम्ही आता बाकीबा बोरकरच्या कविता इंग्लिशमध्ये ट्रान्सलेट करायच्या म्हणल्या, म्हणजे त्या दिस वडाकडे ही कविता तुम्ही इंग्लिशमध्ये ट्रान्सलेट करायची तर त्याचं ओरिजिनल ब्युटी त्याची जाऊ शकते. ते म्हणजे तो काय इतका इझी, पोएट्रीचं ट्रान्सलेशन कसं इझी नाही. आणि दुसरं म्हणजे त्यांना मी सांगितलं तसं की ज्या क्वालिटीची लोक ह्या ट्रान्सलेशनच्या वर्कमध्ये येतात ना, त्यांच्यावरही बरंचसं अवलंबून असतं. ट्रान्सलेट आता इन अ वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड ट्रान्सलेशन इज कॉल्ड as a part of a creative non-fiction. We don't use translation as a creative non-fiction. And original writers are involved in that. Lydia Davis, she's also a writer. She translates a lot of French texts. ते ट्रान्सलेटर्स हे ओरिजिनल लोक आहेत. आपल्याकडे तो प्रकार नाही आहे. फोकलोरचं ट्रान्सलेशन हे ते देठा वगैरे, ते विचारान देठा वगैरे जे करतात, तर ते तसं तेवढं इझी असं ते इट्स नॉट अ इझी. आणि त्याची परत कशी असते, तर तुम्ही पांडुरंग देसाई आहे, त्या विद्या कामात आहे, यू अनलेस यू हे बालाजी आहे, ह्या लोकांना अनलेस यू हॅव बॅकग्राऊंड अँड यू नो द एंटायर कॉन्टेक्स्ट, जस्ट वर्ड टू वर्ड ट्रान्सलेशन इज अ मिस्टेक. You have to sense, and that sense you can miss, and if you don't understand the context and that particular period. Means Soirovanath, suppose you want to document or translate also, unless you know his background, what is Nath Panth's relation to Goa and others, it's not easy. That Mahim Bhatt, what he did, that Chakradhar, it's a founding text. In any of the Indian languages, there is no parallel to that. So it's extremely difficult, and unless you know the context, and see, we don't conduct readership service. See, but many times at my personal level, whenever I go to the college students and I ask them, see, this lot of translations which are taking place of Konkani texts, see, novels and other things. If you ask, nobody is reading. Again, the problem is Konkani is in a Devanagari script. Many people are not able to read the Devanagari script. Now you translate that into English in a Roman script, feeling that people will read, they don't read. Now, translation work, if it's not read by the people, I mean, not a 1 year, 2 year, I'm saying in span of say 20 years, 25 years. The purpose, I mean, what is the purpose of translation? Mahabharata also is Ravindra Kedkar translated into Konkani. महाभारताचे केले ना ट्रान्सलेशन, ट्रान्स्क्रिप्शन. ख्रिसपुरांचे पण कोकणी ट्रान्सलेशन केले, जैन अमोनकरनी केले ना, अमोनकरनी केले. पण who reads that? It's a big volume, Chrispura. It's a small minority. That's 0.01%. 0.01%.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yes, sir. So, as you mentioned, the example of Leela Charitra that shows that writers left out certain details which are part of collective memories. So, this suggests that the history or the oral history which is documented are often manipulated, or we can also say influenced by the writer's, society, or even state's perspective. So during such situation, what kind of methodological approach should a researcher have?
Posing is a difficult question. Even if there are documentation is available and you are recording the history, the references, available references, the biases and prejudices of the person who is recording that matters much. And with his own biases and prejudices, he can distort the entire reference. And that's what happens. See, most of us, we are all common people. We have a moderate kind of biases and prejudices. The people, the creative writers and the thinkers and the good ones, they have got extremely high prejudices and biases. Try to understand. No accusations against them. And with that, many times, what they write in the magazines, thank God you don't read that. If you read that, you are shocked and surprised. Without any basis, how they are writing this? You ask, I asked her the question, same question about one article. Then she answered it tomorrow. And I'm saying how they are writing. Such a high capacity person. A creative writer writes like this. And now you are saying when there are references which are not available. Again, my whole issue is there is a moral and ethical failure. Not in a general sense. एक प्रामाणिकपणा अशा अर्थात म्हणून एक रिसर्चर म्हणून एक कितीतरी आमच्याकडे मोरल आणि इथिकल फ्रेमवर्क आहे की बाबा हाऊ किती बरेदा हाऊ किती ट्रान्सलेट करता एका किती रेफरन्स आहे रेफरन्स पेपर म्हणजे वी कॉन्क्रीट एक्झाम्पल्स लाईक वी हॅव पांडुरंग सोले फ्रॉम गोवा ही रोट मराठा आणि पोर्तुगीजची हिस्ट्री एव्हरीथिंग विथ द रेफरन्स even before that there was acquisition against Aka Priolkar also wrote. He wrote on Francis Xavier, an article. He has one famous book which is out of print, Hindustanche Don Darwaje. He wrote an article. He has not criticized that on Francis Xavier as expert. A very balanced kind of article. So, in the old generation, we had people. They have got a long research tradition. We have got a Paresh Prabhu now. There's a lot of work. The great Goans were outside. Like Raghuveer Bodog, Jubananda Kate. I mean, this Balakrishna Bhogale, Gopalakrishna Bhogale. These great Goans, whatever they wrote, he's edited those books. But with the sincerity, with the moral ethical value. That way he is doing. So again, it becomes individual space. Individual space. Those old generation we used to find many, but this generation we find.
सो असे खूपदा जाता की आम्ही जे लाईक 20-30 इयर्स पयलींची बुकां रीड करता वी सी देम एज अ प्रायमरी सोर्स एंड वेन वी गो ऑन द फील्ड एंड वेन वी इंटरव्यू द community, that particular community, and we ask about the details, they give us some other information. So if we look at the text, it is considered as a primary source, whereas the interviews, they are also a kind of a primary source. So now we have two different narrations, one from text and other from that particular community. So that time, what should be our approach? Like which text or which information or source we should give more importance?
That difference is, suppose you are going for a religious text, normally we don't question religious text. A creative writing, or even say non-fiction. Non-fiction, if somebody writes, there is a parallel view. You should consider the alternative view also. Because you cannot take the fiction or non-fiction, whatever the text is, as a sacred.
So you said in the beginning that each story has its own flavor, meaning the regional flavor basically. And as of when we are going to the region wise in order to collect the stories and accumulates it basically. So sometimes it enriches, sometimes it distorts, and sometimes the biasness appears. So with this regards, the question is, can narrative variations be understood as a process of cultural enrichment or the distortion? Or if it's any of this thing, then in what circumstances?
See, for example, suppose you go to all Indian languages, the common denominator you will find is a gender bias. That's in all languages, except Northeast, the tribal societies. They don't have a gender bias. If their folklore, if you document, they have a relative equality. So these issues definitely will remain, and we have to understand the sociology of that literature. The people who documented in the beginning, say in the medieval, the paper came very late, and these translations in the medieval times only started documenting. So the people who started documenting, they were from the higher class and the higher caste. And that is the class which has a maximum biases and prejudices, not the common man down. So with that prejudices and biases, they have done that work. So you have to look that with a suspicion.
Understood.
Yeah.
I have two more questions. You have discussed multiple texts. One of the prominent texts, which usually at a popular or academic history level, which discusses in terms of
Yeah.
Goa, is the Sahyadri Khand. And there are two sections when people are dealing with. One section is basically either corroborating it with the particular regional stories which is there and bringing out the understanding.
Okay.
And another section has taken Sahyadri Khand on a toss. So
Who has written Sahyadri Khan?
basically there is, as of now, we are not able
Acha,
to
it's a
understand.
part of
Yeah,
the
it's a text. All right. Later on in the 20th century, Jarsandakunna and the Gaitonde has contributed and they have written it. But these, like, there is a one section which is trying to corroborate with the present condition and bringing out the understanding. And then there is another section has taken this at entire toss, Sahyadri Khand, considering it as a myth and whatsoever. So in this situation, how does this tension can be handled when you are dealing with certain types of a text and there is already a pre-existing either a popular or an academic work is there?
I can call that as a dilemma. It's not an easy way you can resolve this. This is a dilemma, one has to undergo this. It's not a problem which can be solved. Dilemma is something you have to undergo this. Like Arjuna, you have to attack that other side or no. You have to undergo that.
Yes. And the
Yes.
last one is that when we write, usually when we deal with oral traditions, documentations, we use certain phrases. We said that voice of a powerful person or a power of a person's voice. So how these two things can be put it across in the writing? Either this can be used as interchangeably or this can be used as two different distinct phrases.
My general reply to this is when you're going for a research, I don't know whether you have a subject called research methods.
Yes, we do have.
Now, one is the subject in a formal education, but subsequently, the kind of academic training one needs to go for a research, and that's extremely crucial. Many times in our Indian conditions, we learn it in a Guru Shishya Parampara. Many times we register for our PhD or something to a guide. But you may not have a good quality guide in a university or otherwise. And with the digital technology now, things are available all over the world. So any good number of person you can access him. What he says, it takes a long time to get ourselves disciplined in his research methods, and it's not easy. It's not easy, and we often get confused. And many times, simplistic way, we take our decisions based on the identities or the reputation. Reputation also many times is appearance.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, this is the last question. Yeah, you can ask.
Yeah, so sir, this is out of my experience that I have encountered many times. So during my PhD, I was interviewing a lot of people, and oral history is one of my thing that I was looking at. So I was trying to look at a very sensitive topics, that is Devdasi, because my area of study was Perne Taluka, where there were a lot of this Devdasi practices were going on. So I was trying to look at their experiences and all these things. So
Devdasi.
yeah, Devdasi. So the problem was that which I faced was many people were sharing me a lot of information, but they were not okay me in citing their names. And so this is the main problem I faced, that in history whatever we write we cite, and especially if it is thesis, then you need to give you have footnotes, endnotes and references where we need to put a reference. So during that time I could not cite this kind of information, the people names and all. So what do you think, what is ethical in this, or any, is there any way to get off this problem?
See, again, to begin with the Devdasi, a very good book is written 2 years back by Arundekar.
No, but oral history also,
Again, try to understand. Devdasi is a system which is part of a degeneration of our temple institutions. So temples are, incidentally, in Goa and largely other parts also, are governed by the higher caste, and they are the one who were either rulers or the supporters of the rulers, and that was part of their what you can say leisure culture. So they normally don't admit this, but this is the serious part, and if you write anything, they will not take it lightly. So this is a very different kind of aspect, Devdasi, particularly in Goa and other parts also. In Karnataka also you can find that. So this female entertainment was largely a part right from the medieval India. But if you see, Mughals dealt that differently. Our Indian landlords dealt that differently. But as they were ruling, there are very few writers who came out. In Kankona, there's one fellow who wrote his autobiography. Penginkar. Now, Rajaram Penginkar, suppose you read that, how frank he is. How frank he is. Very rarely somebody writes like that. And that lady Arandukar also, she wrote. Now, if you read that, you have a different opinion about the higher caste in Goa. If you seriously read those literature. So that system exposes what kind of system our own leisure class, what we made, those ruling class, they made. And it's difficult, people will not come out openly and tell you. But there has been a documentation of this in various places. And very rarely somebody comes very frankly on this. PhD, this is a subject, but very difficult to get you first-hand information. The people who are that trade, they will not.
So if your topic is very sensitive, that you are trying to interview someone and that person is not okay in citing the name, or so in such cases, what are we supposed to do? Because the data is very authentic and it's very factual. I mean, you try to cross check.
You have to mention that and record. You have to mention the context and record.
Person is not.
Suppose you want to document last 20 years communal riots in India, or the lynching of people, last 10 years lynching of people in India. Very difficult to document. You go to the people and ask them. Nobody will tell you anything. These are difficult issues. But then some small minority people definitely will go and document this. It's a difficult task. You may not get a primary sources. Many times you have to then go for secondary sources. That primary source, many times in these kind of sensitive areas, becomes a difficult area. And then, but you have to give the context. So you cannot authoritatively say, no, like this happened like this. No. There's a possibility. Therefore, I said even Chakradhar, this one writer, scholar, B.B. Kolte, he wrote his biography and he said Chakradhar was killed. That biography was removed by Government of Maharashtra within 15 days. It's out of, there's a ban on that. These are sensitive matters. They don't like saying this. So we say disappeared. So your language again can be slightly suggestive. Instead of directly writing, you can be suggestive. Because intolerance is so high, nobody will accept what you are writing. Or if you want to publish your PhD thesis, there will be issues. There will be issues.
Citation becomes problem.
Yes.